My wife, Christina, packed her bags the day I was fired from my corporate finance job, saying she couldn't handle the uncertainty of being married to someone unemployed. My name is Lawrence Bennett, 37 years old, former director of corporate finance at Pinnacle Industries in Seattle, Washington. I'd been married to Christina for 8 years, and she chose the moment when I walked through the door with my termination letter to abandon everything we'd built together. The firing came without warning on a Friday afternoon. Budget cuts, my boss explained, avoiding eye contact as security escorted me from the building. After 12 years with the company and a spotless performance record, I was suddenly unemployed with 2 hours' notice and a severance package that barely covered 2 months of expenses. Christina was waiting when I got home, having somehow already heard the news through her network of corporate wives. Her designer luggage was packed and sitting by the front door, like she was heading to the airport, rather than ending our marriage. "I can't do this, Larry," she said without preamble. "I can't handle the uncertainty of being married to someone unemployed. I need stability, and you can't provide that anymore." What she didn't know was that I'd been building multiple passive income streams for 5 years. What she didn't know was that my corporate salary had become the smallest part of our household income. And what she definitely didn't know was that my backup plan was already generating $35,000 per month in passive revenue that would continue flowing whether I had a job or not. Christina had always been impressed by the corporate lifestyle. She loved telling people at parties that her husband was a finance director at a Fortune 500 company. She enjoyed the status that came with my title, the networking events, the assumption that we were financially secure, because I wore suits and worked in a downtown office tower. But she'd never been interested in understanding how wealth was actually built. When I tried to discuss our investment strategy, she'd change the subject. When I suggested reviewing our financial planning, she'd say she trusted me to handle the money stuff, while she focused on spending it. The irony was that I'd been using my corporate finance expertise to build wealth outside of my employment for years. Real estate investments, dividend-paying stock portfolios, peer-to-peer lending, cryptocurrency holdings, and a consulting business that generated revenue from clients who valued my financial analysis skills. It started in my 3rd year at Pinnacle, when I realized that corporate employment, no matter how well paid, was fundamentally unstable. Companies could eliminate positions overnight, merge with competitors, or relocate operations to cheaper markets. Anyone who depended entirely on employment income was one decision away from financial catastrophe. So I began systematically building alternatives. Every bonus, every raise, every extra dollar went toward investments that would generate passive income, real estate properties that produced rental revenue, dividend stocks that paid quarterly, peer-to-peer loans that generated monthly interest, business investments that provided ongoing royalty payments. By my 5th year at Pinnacle, my passive income exceeded $20,000 per month. By my 7th year, it was over $30,000. By the time I was fired, my investments were generating $35,000 monthly in passive revenue, nearly $420,000 annually, without any employment at all. But I'd never told Christina about the full extent of our passive income. She saw my Pinnacle salary and assumed that was our primary source of financial security. She lived comfortably on what she thought was employment income, never realizing that most of our lifestyle was actually funded by investments she'd never bothered to understand. "This is temporary," I said calmly, as she wheeled her luggage toward the door. "Losing a job doesn't mean losing income." She stopped and turned around, her face a mixture of pity and frustration. "Larry, you're in denial. Without your salary, we can't maintain our lifestyle. I'm not going to wait around while you figure out how to rebuild your career." "What if I told you that losing my job won't affect our income at all?" I asked. She laughed bitterly. "Then I'd say you're having a breakdown. Your salary was $180,000. That money is gone, and unemployment benefits won't come close to replacing it." I nodded thoughtfully. Christina was making the same mistake that most people make, assuming that employment income is the only form of real income. She'd never learned to distinguish between active and passive revenue streams. "You're right that my employment income is gone," I said. "But that represents less than half of our actual household income." Her expression changed from pity to confusion. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out my laptop and opened our investment portfolio dashboard. Our real estate properties generate $18,000 per month in rental income. Our dividend stocks pay $8,000 quarterly. Our peer-to-peer lending generates $6,000 monthly. Our business investments produce $3,000 monthly in royalties. Christina stared at the screen, her face cycling through disbelief, shock, and anger. "This can't be real. You've been making this much money from investments." "We've been making this much money," I corrected. "These investments were built with our joint income over the past 5 years." "You never told me about any of this," she accused. "You never asked," I replied honestly. "Every time I tried to discuss our investment strategy, you said you weren't interested in boring financial stuff. You wanted to enjoy the benefits without understanding how they were created." This was true. For years, I'd attempted to involve Christina in our long-term financial planning. I'd suggested she learn about real estate investing, proposed that we review our portfolio together, recommended that she understand the business investments I was making on our behalf. She'd consistently declined, saying she preferred to focus on enjoying life while I handled the technical details. "I trusted you to tell me about important financial decisions," she said weakly. "I did tell you," I replied, pulling up email threads and text messages. "Here's where I told you about the Portland rental property. Here's where I explained the dividend reinvestment strategy. Here's where I discussed the peer-to-peer lending platform." The evidence was overwhelming. Every major investment decision had been communicated to Christina, though she'd responded with minimal interest or outright dismissal. She'd received all the information, but had chosen not to engage with it. "But you let me think we were dependent on your job," she protested. "You assumed we were dependent on my job," I corrected. "I built these income streams specifically so we wouldn't be dependent on employment. But you were more comfortable believing in job security than investment security." Christina sat down heavily, still staring at the investment dashboard. The numbers were clear. Our passive income exceeded my former salary by more than $240,000 annually. Losing my job hadn't decreased our wealth. It had simply freed up my time to focus on growing our investments. "This changed everything," she said desperately. "I made a mistake. I want to stay and work through this together." I shook my head. "The marriage ended when you decided to abandon me, based on assumptions instead of facts. This conversation is about understanding what you're walking away from, not about reconciliation." "But I didn't know about the passive income," she protested. "Exactly," I replied. "You were willing to leave me when you thought I was unemployed and financially vulnerable. You want to stay now that you know I'm actually wealthier without the job than I was with it. That tells me everything I need to know about your commitment." Christina's departure became final that evening, but not before she consulted with a divorce attorney about her potential claim to the investment income. Her lawyer quickly discovered that most of our assets were structured as separate property through legal entities I'd established before significant appreciation occurred. The real estate properties were owned by LLCs that had been created with funds from my individual retirement accounts. The stock portfolios were in my name only, built with income that predated our marriage. The business investments were structured as separate intellectual property that couldn't be claimed as marital assets. Our prenuptial agreement, which Christina had signed without reading carefully, specifically protected individually developed passive income streams from division during divorce. She'd focused on the lifestyle protections in the prenup without understanding the asset protection clauses. The divorce proceedings took 4 months, during which Christina's attorney argued that I'd hidden assets from her during our marriage. They claimed that my failure to actively emphasize the extent of our passive income constituted financial deception that should invalidate our prenuptial agreement. But I had comprehensive documentation showing that Christina had been consistently informed about our investments and had chosen not to engage with the details. Email records, text messages, financial statements that had been available in our home office, and tax returns that showed increasing investment income, year after year. More importantly, I had evidence that Christina had been actively uninterested in our financial planning. Social media posts, where she joked about being married to someone who talks about money too much. Text messages to friends, where she'd said she didn't want to think about boring investment stuff. Bank statements showing that she'd never accessed our investment accounts, despite having login credentials. The judge's ruling was decisive. Mrs. Bennett chose not to participate in financial planning, despite having access to all relevant information and repeated invitations to engage with investment decisions. Her decision to leave during a temporary employment disruption demonstrates that her interest was in lifestyle maintenance rather than partnership building. Christina received exactly what our prenup specified: $75,000 and her personal property. She also received half of our joint checking account, which contained $12,000 at the time of separation. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I received an offer for a new position: Chief Financial Officer at a growing tech company, with a salary of $250,000 plus equity participation. But I turned it down. My passive income had grown to $42,000 per month during the divorce proceedings, and I was enjoying the freedom to focus on investment opportunities without corporate constraints. Instead, I launched Bennett Capital Management, an investment advisory firm specializing in passive income development for high net worth individuals. My track record of building substantial passive income while maintaining full-time employment attracted clients who wanted similar financial independence. The business was immediately successful. Executives who'd experienced corporate downsizing, entrepreneurs who wanted to diversify beyond their businesses, and professionals who recognized the instability of employment income all sought my expertise in building passive revenue streams. 6 months after Christina left, I was featured in Financial Planning magazine. From employee to entrepreneur, building passive income for true financial freedom. The article detailed my investment strategies, my transition from corporate employment to financial independence, and my new advisory business. Christina called me the day the article was published. "Everyone's talking about how successful you've become," she said, her voice strained. "They're saying you're making more money than when you had your corporate job." "Probably," I agreed. "Passive income tends to grow when you can focus on it full time, instead of splitting attention with employment obligations." "I look like an idiot," she said quietly. "People know I left you right after you were fired, and now they're seeing that you're actually more successful than before." "You didn't leave me because I was fired," I said. "You left me because you thought being fired meant being poor. The money was never the real issue. Your lack of faith in my ability to provide security was the issue." A year after the divorce, I started dating again, but with completely different criteria. I met Dr. Rachel Morgan, a pediatric surgeon who'd built her own substantial wealth through real estate investments and understood the importance of financial independence beyond employment income. The difference between us and most couples, Rachel said one evening, as we reviewed our respective investment portfolios, is that we both understand the difference between employment security and financial security. That makes us both committed to building something that can survive any external circumstances. She was right. Rachel had experienced the instability of medical practice through health system mergers and insurance changes, and she understood that true security came from multiple income sources rather than dependence on any single revenue stream. We both approached our relationship with the wisdom that comes from building wealth systematically. 2 years after the divorce, I received an unexpected visitor. Christina stood in my new office lobby, looking tired and significantly older than I remembered. She'd apparently taken a job in marketing for a small firm, a dramatic step down from her previous role as corporate executive's wife. "I wanted to apologize," she said without preamble. "Not because I want anything from you, but because I finally understand what I actually lost." I studied her face, looking for the manipulation I'd learned to detect in client relationships. Instead, I saw genuine regret. "What do you think you lost?" "A partner who built real security while I was focused on apparent security," she said. "Someone who was planning for independence while I was depending on dependence." I nodded. "The marriage couldn't survive your belief that employment equals security. You measured stability by job titles rather than by actual financial independence." "I know that now," she said. "Watching you succeed after I left taught me the difference between having a job and having financial freedom." 3 years post-divorce, I was invited to speak at the Financial Planning Association's annual conference about building passive income while employed. During my presentation, I used my divorce as a case study in how misconceptions about financial security can damage personal relationships. "The most important lesson," I told the room full of financial advisors, "is that true partnership requires shared understanding of how wealth is actually built. Someone who equates your worth with your employment status will never appreciate your wealth-building strategy." A young advisor raised his hand. "How do you balance building passive income quietly with ensuring your spouse understands your financial position?" It was a question I'd been considering since meeting Rachel. "You share your philosophy and progress regularly, but you don't force engagement," I said. "Someone who's genuinely interested in partnership will want to understand your approach to financial security. Someone who's only interested in lifestyle will focus on current spending power rather than long-term wealth building." 5 years after being fired from Pinnacle Industries, I was featured on the cover of Entrepreneur magazine. "The Passive Income Millionaire: How One Man Turned Job Loss into Financial Freedom." The article detailed Bennett Capital Management's growth, my personal investment philosophy, and my approach to building multiple revenue streams that could survive any economic disruption. My net worth had grown to over $15 million through continued investment returns, business growth, and new passive income opportunities. The job loss that Christina couldn't handle had become the catalyst for greater financial success than I'd ever achieved as an employee. Rachel and I were planning our wedding, this time with someone who understood that financial security was built through systematic investing rather than employment dependence. We'd built our relationship during my transition from employee to entrepreneur, and she'd proven her partnership through uncertainty rather than just during stability. That night, as we celebrated the magazine feature at our favorite restaurant, Rachel raised her glass in a toast to surviving abandonment and finding someone who understands that real security comes from what you build, not where you work. I smiled, thinking about the journey from Christina's departure to Rachel's partnership. to learning the difference between people who want employment security and people who want financial independence. In the end, Christina's decision to leave me after losing my job had revealed exactly who she was when tested by apparent adversity. She'd chosen the illusion of employment security over the reality of financial independence, immediate comfort over long-term partnership. Her abandonment had freed me to find someone who understood that true wealth comes from what you build systematically, not what you earn temporarily. The job that Christina thought defined my worth became irrelevant to my actual financial success. The employment security she craved turned out to be the weakest form of financial planning. The stability she sought through my corporate position was actually found through the passive income streams she'd ignored. Employment taught me that the most dangerous financial strategy is depending entirely on someone else's decision about your income. Christina's departure taught me that the most dangerous relationship strategy is partnering with someone who measures your worth by your employment status rather than your wealth-building ability. In the end, the most valuable thing I built during those years wasn't my passive income portfolio. It was the wisdom to recognize the difference between someone who wants employment security and someone who wants to build financial independence together. That insight was worth more than all the passive income Christina walked away from.